1, 2, 3, 4.
Screen time, screen time, screen time, screen time.
It's my screen time too.
Screen time, screen time.
Hello, and welcome to It's My Screen Time Too, the podcast where two moms review the best and worst in children's programming. From Netflix reboots and YouTube shorts to Disney classics and Pixar blockbusters. We watch, you listen. Find out what you can tolerate watching for family movie night, what to avoid altogether, and what you'll want to watch alone voluntarily. I'm Deborah.
And I'm Katie.
And I have 3 kids. Tony is 13 and Libby and Nate are 10.
And I have 2 kids. Jay is 7 and Kenny is 4. They are pretty stinking adorable, aren't they?
They are.
We like to tell a quick story about how awesome or occasionally awful our kids are, because in addition to being witty and incisive pop culture consumers, we're moms too. Deborah, what have your kids been up to?
Nate wants to audition to be a kid guest on a podcast.
I'm so proud. Tell me more.
Me too. So the requirements are he needs to be on, record himself on a Zoom and have an external microphone like we have, not like a gamer microphone or just like the laptop built-in microphone. And then he has to talk about something he's good at. So I'm very pleased for him. I hope that he makes it on. That'd be super fun.
That's so exciting.
Yeah, and it's one of those things I can actually help him with this. This is a dream that might actually be realized.
Oh.
How about your kids? What have they been up to?
Okay, so Mother's Day is coming up on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
Listeners, it will have been past when you guys listen to this. But Jay, my 7-year-old, is being super cagey and secretive about this Mother's Day gift that he has for me, which is the first time something like this has happened. Usually it's just whatever they make at school, like they give me as an afterthought, or more likely I clean out of their backpacks on Friday afternoon. So they're not even really aware that Mother's Day is a special day or anything like that. But pretty much for the past week, he's been like, Mom, I got to go up to my room to work on your Mother's Day present. You have to knock if you're coming in, so I know. So regardless of what it is, I find it really sweet that it's been on his mind.
Cute.
Screen time in the news today is really proving that we are old now. That is mostly why I wanted to include it. We felt a little bit this way when we covered Miss Rachel a few episodes ago, because both of us are out of the toddler game at this point. But I stumbled across this Romper article that just fascinated me. So the headline was, "Why are parents on social media suddenly so obsessed with frame rate?" And it was written by Katie McPherson, and it dropped on May 6th. So I know we said we didn't want to cover random screen time stories anymore because the Wall Street Journal told us it was okay not to. But this felt random enough that I really wanted to talk about it, because I had no idea that there was any controversy going on about frame rate. Essentially, people on social media are seeking out shows with a quote-unquote low frame rate because they feel they will be less problematically stimulating for toddlers.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's just because we've been doing this for a long time, and because I was at least marginally familiar with animation before we even started this podcast, that I looked at this and I thought, isn't that just the rate of motion on film? Isn't it just normally 24 frames per second? That's what it is, and it's not really something that people monkey with all that much. I don't know. Were you as, I guess, confused by the premise as I was?
The article spells this out, but the people are looking for something that's not really fast-paced with a lot of cutaway scenes.
Yeah, they're very much
which
confusing.
That's not what frame rate means, but I get what they're talking about.
Exactly. They're using the wrong term. What they want are shows without quick cuts. So aside from the technical issue of what is a frame rate and what is a cut,
Mm-hmm.
they're worried that watching certain shows is proving to be overstimulating for their kids. And they're trying to find things that are not going to cause tantrums. And I know I'm falling into the trap of someone who this is like way back in the rearview mirror, and I was probably really obsessed with it too when my kids were that little. But the
Mm-hmm.
reality is that different kids are going to react differently to different levels of stimulation, and it almost doesn't matter, or you just have to like take it on a case by case basis, right? In terms of this quick cutting, I don't think that's going to be the panacea that a lot of these social media moms seem to think it is. Plus, on the issue of tantrums, like kids are just going to freak out when you take the thing away at that age.
Mm-hmm.
Like it doesn't really
Yeah.
matter what the thing is.
Right. I think it's just so situational. Like, if you are using the television or your phone or whatever to calm a kid down before nap time, you want a puff and rock. But if you just want them to be distracted by something, then you can go for a show that's a little more vigorous.
Yeah. There was a really quick kind of bullet point list at the end of the article with how to find quality shows for your child. I didn't really find much to object to here. She recommended checking the content of the show to make sure it's age appropriate, which, you know, parents can judge that
Mm-hmm.
as they care to. They recommend interacting with your child while they watch the show or movie, something that we are big proponents of here on It's My Screen Time too. And they recommend researching who produces it, if it's an institution with an actual educational mandate as opposed to just a greedy, cash-loving corporation.
Right.
And I think I can agree with all of those recommendations. How about you?
They were excellent recommendations. Most screen time articles wrap up that way.
Yep, nothing
So it
super
wasn't
new.
surprising, but it was good to read again.
I just thought it was so funny that like frame rate was in the conversation, because the only time I could think of like frame rate even entering my consciousness as something that people would change is when, do you remember when the Hobbit trilogy came out?
Vaguely, yes.
Okay, so the big thing about this trilogy was that Peter Jackson, the director, decided to film it in an extra high frame rate. So instead of being 24 frames per second, which is pretty standard, he filmed it in double that, so 48. The idea
Oh.
being that everything would look that much more detailed and it would be much closer to what you would see if you were seeing something not just on a screen, like in real life.
Interesting.
The takeaway, I think, from most people when it came to those movies, in addition to why did you split a very short children's book into 3 very long movies, was that all that accomplished, the higher frame rate accomplished, was to make all of the fake sets look fake. Whereas when you were seeing those same fake sets in like your normal 24 frames per second, they looked opulent and lavish, and the fake golden sword looked really golden. But when you saw it at 48 frames per second, you could tell it was a prop.
Oh, that's funny.
So that's the only time that I've been forced to think about frame rate recently. All right. Do we have any follow up from our last episode?
Okay, last episode we reviewed Jane, and it was around Earth Day, and we were talking about conservation shows, eco-friendly messages, and children's programming, and it was a very appropriate weekend for Libby to insist that I watch Blackfish with her and her twin brother Nate, and that's the documentary about SeaWorld. It came out, I don't know, more than a decade ago, and it's about all the killer whales who killed their trainers.
I didn't even realize this was a thing.
Oh, I remember when it came out, and I did not see it because it looked disturbing. And it was. Like, I ended up fast forwarding through some parts of it for myself.
Oh.
Not even for the kids. I do not recommend. I mean, I guess it's good to know about, but it made us so sad, and it's such a tragic story. I mean, for the trainers, yes, but also just like the orcas in captivity. So sad.
Did it make you want to just turn on good old Free Willy?
I didn't even think about that. Maybe we would enjoy that one. Yeah.
We were just at a really nice aquarium last week, and I thought of that movie, and it occurred to me to wonder how it's aged.
Yeah, we should give it a try.
Yeah, maybe during the summer doldrums, we'll revisit Free Willy.
Today we are talking about Peter Pan and Wendy, which is a movie that premiered on Disney Plus on April 28th of this year, 2023. It's a live action adventure based both on J.M. Barrie's 1904 play Peter Pan, or The Boy Who Wouldn't Grow Up, and Walt Disney's 1953 animated film Peter Pan. The film was rated PG and it runs for 1 hour 46 minutes. It was directed by David Lowery, who directed the much talked about The Green Knight in 2021 and previous Disney adaptation of an existing property, 2016's Pete's Dragon.
Did you see that one? I heard it was good.
If I did, I don't remember.
I think it got turned on way, way back. This would have been early podcast days when we lived in Dallas. And it was one of those, like, it was on in the background, but I wasn't able to pay enough attention. That's another one I might want to revisit. Well, I'm just making a mental list during this whole episode.
Yeah, and it's on Disney Plus?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. The screenplay was written by Lowery and Toby Halbrooks, who also wrote the screenplay for Pete's Dragon. They both wrote the screenplay for Pete's Dragon together, and it's a Walt Disney Pictures production. And the movie is based on a story we're all familiar with. Wendy and her younger brothers travel to Neverland with Peter Pan and his fairy friend Tinkerbell to battle the evil Captain Hook with the help of Peter's band of lost boys. And why did we pick it? Because we wind up talking about the 1953 version as a good example of a famously racist movie that we're reluctant to share with our kids these days. This is one live action remake that Disney seemed to need, so we were curious about it. And there have been so many versions of this story. We were really curious to see what this latest movie adds to the story, or if it adds anything at all to the Peter Pan canon.
Well, let's just jump right off talking about these bazillion different versions of Peter Pan. And what were some of the previous versions that you were most familiar with before sitting down to watch this one?
Okay, the one I most recently remembered was the Peter Pan Live, which was on like network TV with Christopher
yeah, with
Walken.
Allison Williams. Wait, is that her name? Okay.
Yep. From Girls.
Yeah, I knew you'd watch it because you liked Girls.
And then Jake and the Neverland Pirates was a show that was kind of on the periphery of Tony's viewing when he was little. Like, he never got super into it, but it was something that he definitely watched.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, Hook was a big one. I think I might have even gone to see that in the theater.
Yeah, me too. Hook remains... Okay, so Hook came out in 1991. Yes, 1991.
Mm-hmm.
And Kevin compares every version of Peter Pan not to the actual story of Peter Pan, but to Hook. Like, that's how formative that version of the story was for him.
It is an iconic version. That might be, besides the animated film, the most iconic in this list.
Yeah, I guess I should read off the list. Okay, so J.M. Barrie wrote the original play in 1904. Fast forward to 1953, there was the Disney cartoon. Then in the 50s, there was the musical version starring Mary Martin. It was very confusing to me as a child because, like, I could tell she was a grown woman playing a boy, but that's just the way it was written. And I assume that's the version they did in the Peter Pan Live, yes?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I think so.
And then there was Hook in 1991, which wasn't a straight adaptation of Peter Pan. It was like grown-up Peter Pan comes back and tries to re-embrace his inner child, starring Robin Williams. And then they had a 2003 live-action Peter Pan with Jason Isaacs as Hook, which I don't think I'd ever seen. I read a little bit about it. I heard there was it like invested more in like the more romantic possibilities between Peter Pan and Wendy
Okay.
than other versions. 2004, there was Finding Neverland, which was supposed to be the story of J.M. Barrie getting inspired to write Peter Pan. And that was a really popular movie starring Johnny Depp. And then they later made that into a musical. The list just keeps going, guys. Okay, you mentioned Jake and the Neverland Pirates. And then there was one from 2015 called Pan that was directed by Joe Wright. Joe Wright is the Atonement guy, right?
I have no idea. This one was not on my radar in 2015.
Yeah. Did you look at any of the art for it?
No.
It looks like it was something. And that wasn't even that long ago. So people just keep reiterating Peter Pan, and it's really interesting that a mere 8 years later, now we have this latest Disney version.
Mm-hmm.
The Mary Martin musical version was probably the one I was most familiar with as a kid, even more so than the Disney cartoon.
Okay.
Yeah, that was the one that I wanted to turn on immediately after watching this.
Sure, sure.
All right, so all that being said, what were your expectations going into it? Seeing the trailer, knowing the title, and pretty much that was it. What were you thinking you were going to get out of this?
Okay, so many years ago, I took a parenting class through the Minneapolis public school system, and this was a question that came up, like, what do you do about beloved children's properties from your youth, or even before that, that are no longer appropriate for your kids? This one mom asked the question, and there was another mom in the class who was Indigenous, and she mentioned Peter Pan as like a prime example of something that she would not show her kids. She didn't think anybody else, Indigenous or white or whatever your background, should show people. And she had like a very compelling argument for the way in which Native Americans are represented in the movie. And like, you know, when I was a kid, we had like a picture book that was just based on that animation from the movie. So I've never showed it to my kids, and I have that conversation in my head. Like, I remember that conversation whenever we're watching like a old Disney classic or something, and want to be respectful of her perspective because I think it was very valuable. Like, I don't have a lot of Indigenous friends or acquaintances, so I really took her words to heart. And then there's the Michael Jackson documentary.
Finding Neverland? No. Is that
Which
what it
is
was
not
called? No, Finding Neverland was the Johnny Depp movie.
Well, Michael Jackson's like ranch was called Neverland, and like I just can't separate Peter Pan and the Lost Boys from that disturbing documentary. So I had pretty low expectations going into this.
I would say.
But when I was a kid, I should say, I loved the film, the original animated film, when I was a child.
And there were some iconic moments, like as much as I wanted them to fix from the original Disney cartoon, there were some iconic images that I really wanted to make sure they got in there. The classic costumes with John wearing the top hat. I feel like that's very iconic. With his like long nightgown. If they had gotten rid of that, I would have been really disappointed. You know, Tinkerbell's green dress is so iconic to the Disney character. I felt like I really hoped they would include that.
Nana was one of my favorites.
Yeah,
the fact that the dog is like the babysitter.
Yeah. Yes, they definitely needed to have Nana. Let's see, what other expectations did I have going into it? I mean, I expected them to make some of these really obvious corrections. Like, I knew that they had to know that Tiger Lily and the depiction of Native Americans was a problem that they needed to fix. Very obviously. I knew that they knew that the fact that Lost Boys were all boys and it was such a male-heavy story was something that they would want to fix. So I figured I would see that. I was a little worried about the girl bossification of Wendy and how that would work out. I'm sure we'll get into it more, but those two things, plot-wise, the fleshing out of Tiger Lily's character and the integration of more female roles into the plot, were my biggest expectations going into it.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we laid the groundwork. Now's the big question. Did you like it?
I did enjoy watching it.
Did it conform to your expectations?
I don't think that the filmmakers fixed those issues, but they treated them with a little more respectfulness than the original film did.
It's funny because they titled it Peter Pan and Wendy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the thing I was worried about going into it was what they would do to Wendy's character, and I didn't want it to be too much of a you go girl story, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they went a certain way with the plot that surprised me. They chose to focus a lot more on I would say the relationship between Peter Pan and Captain Hook, but that's not even right. They chose to focus a lot more on Captain Hook than I was anticipating. It was not anywhere in my radar that would be almost the primary focus of the movie would be Captain Hook's journey.
Mm-hmm.
Which I guess grown-up movies kind of have an obsession with endlessly having to tell the backstories of villainous characters, so I should not have been that surprised. Disney itself, in going back into its catalog, has done things like that recently with Maleficent and their Cruella de Vil movies.
Mm-hmm.
So whether we actually want it or not, they think it's something that we want. I could have actually done with more Wendy and less Hook.
I definitely expected more Wendy, and it wasn't very Wendy-centric for what the title suggested.
Yeah, it was strange. It was an odd decision. All right, so let's get into the casting characters. Was there anyone that you particularly loved or hated?
I liked the actors that played Wendy and Peter Pan. I thought they were great. I thought that the actor who played Peter Pan had that perfect sort of my voice is changing, but it hasn't settled yet. I don't know how they captured that, because that's like a very short window in a adolescent's life, and it was perfect.
And he was just all eyes. His face was all eyes, and it was just so adorable.
Yeah, he very much communicated the wistful, I miss my mother, but it's worth it to be a boy forever.
I guess I shouldn't be looked to provide a objective account of this movie when, like, even just hearing that brief plot description makes me roll my eyes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The actress who played Wendy, Ever Anderson, to me looked so much like the actress from Nutcracker and the Four Realms that I had to look them up to make sure they weren't the same person, even though I knew that too much time had passed between the two movies. Like, there's no way that this girl could have remained that same age forever, but they do look eerily alike, so...
Interesting. I thought she looked like a young Liv Tyler. And then I was like, but Liv Tyler isn't old enough to have a daughter that old. But I think she actually is.
Yeah, I think she is.
It's
too.
possible.
What about Jude Law as Captain Hook, seeing as he was such a big part of the movie? What did you think?
That was a good role for him. He's very impish.
At first, before I knew that they were going to focus so much on Hook, in his first couple of introductions, I definitely compared him disfavorably to the Hook in the cartoon, because the Hook in the animated version is such a buffoon.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like they were giving too much weight to Jude Law. But then I was like, oh, wait, that's the whole point of the movie. Okay, I guess it's fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as far as typecasting, he is, I think, too handsome for that role. I think Captain Hook should be like more craggy and ugly, but I thought Jude Law did fine.
We don't generally cast ugly men to play Captain Hook, though. I mean,
yeah, that's
your mileage
true.
on Dustin Hoffman may vary, but he played Captain Hook in Hook from our childhood. I made a mistake when I was writing the doc, and I said that past Hooks include Hugh Jackman, but then I looked at the cast list for that weird 2015 Peter Pan movie, and he wasn't Hook. He was Blackbeard, so there was another actor
Oh,
playing Hook. Too many
okay.
pirates. What about Yara Shahidi as Tinkerbell? I know she's a favorite gritty HBO reboot cast member for you.
I thought she was incredible and underutilized. What did you think?
I liked the changes that they made to Tinkerbell's character. Tinkerbell in the original Disney animated film is very one note, and her character trait is sassy, and that is all
Mm-hmm.
she is. In other versions of Peter Pan, you get like this wistful wannabe romance on the part of Tinkerbell. She's somehow in love with Peter Pan,
Mm-hmm.
stated very explicitly in Hook between Julia Roberts and Robin Williams. But I liked that this one was giving her a little more credit and a little more agency and a little more smarts. I liked this version of Tinkerbell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What about Jim Gaffigan as Smee? I thought he was kind of awful.
I didn't really recognize who he was until I read your doc because he's not an actor that I care about, I guess.
Uh-huh.
He was fine. I didn't have any expectations of him necessarily. I thought all the pirates were piratey enough.
I just don't think he's meant to do the accent.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Any other characters you want to mention?
I thought that the Lost Boys were very adorable.
They were, but that's never been their problem. They've always been pretty cute.
Mm-hmm. Right.
We didn't mention the actress that played Tiger Lily.
She was great, but really? You're not going to change the situation, filmmakers? I don't know. It still had such a colonialist tone to the whole like Lost Boys and Peter Pan taking over the island where Tiger Lily originally came from.
I guess in a charitable viewing of it, it seemed that the Lost Boys were pretty localized to the area around their fort and to the beach where the pirate ship was.
Mm-hmm.
And then Tiger Lily had her whole regular life with her family and her tribe that
Mm-hmm.
they could have taken up 99.9% of Neverland.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that I got as immediate an impression that like Peter Pan was striving for full colonization.
Okay.
And I did like that they actually cast a Native American actress and not a white woman to play this role.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that
Which
was
they've
good.
been casting white women to play this role for a long time.
That's true.
Again, that weird 2015 movie. It was just 2015. It was so recently. They cast Rooney Mara. Mara? Rooney Mara.
Well, she does have dark hair.
That's all it takes. So, Peter Pan is now called Peter Pan and Wendy. Was this really all about the girl bossification of Wendy, and did it work for you?
I felt that it was quite oppressive in its insistence on heteronormativity. Okay, I wanted to talk about this because I thought about this way more than I needed to. So, I have recently become acquainted with queer theorist Jose Esteban Muniz
Okay.
from like a New York Times Magazine article. And so he has this theory about straight time as like a mindset where productivity and reproduction are really emphasized. And then there's like a stigma around people who kind of opt out of that straight time narrative, like have kids by this age, buy a house by this age, career, retire. And I felt like Wendy is very forced in this film to like demonstrate a maternal instinct. She's supposed to be mothering the Lost Boys. I mean, in every version of Peter Pan. And she's supposed to go on to boarding school. And the idea is like she's eventually going to become a mother herself. And so I would entertain a version of Peter Pan where Wendy escapes to Neverland for a little while longer than she's allowed to in most of these versions. Or like a role reversal where Wendy's the one getting the brothers to come along with her, or like convincing Peter Pan to stay there. I don't know. I just would like to see a different retelling of the story. Not a retelling, a different version. Not a different version.
Because we need more versions.
I don't know, a speculative inversion of what we normally see in these movies.
I like this. Let me ask you one question. How much of that do you think can be safely attributed to the fact that this is a period piece and they are setting it in the time of the original play, which would be the early 1900s? Does that give them any sort of a pass to imply that Wendy is going to be slotting herself into these heteronormative roles?
I suppose, but there were people in that time period, like I think of like Gertrude Stein and Alice B. Toklas, who were living like on a queer timeline and doing things not in the quote unquote normal order.
All right, so my second question is, there's pretty much one moment we see where Wendy very explicitly comes to terms with the fact that no, she actually does want to grow up.
Mm-hmm.
And we see a short montage of important moments in her life moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a version where they could have just slightly tweaked that montage that would have made you feel less like they were emphasizing her role as a future mother? Because remember, in other versions of Peter Pan, like the whole thing is that Wendy continues to live in that house as she's growing up. So Peter comes back and like one day finds that Wendy is the mother, or one day finds that Wendy is the grandmother. And at least they did away with that.
Right. Yeah, that's true. You're convincing me.
Oh, thanks. I mean, I'm never not arguing that we need to rise up against the patriarchy, but it maybe bothered me less because I was just so confused by the whole Hook thing. I never ever would have thought I would say this, but I almost wanted more Peter Pan in this Peter Pan movie because it was a little bit about Wendy and her coming to terms with wanting to grow up. It was a lot about Hook and him dealing with his disappointment in Peter, but we got very little of Peter's perspective in any of this. Again, I thought it was just weirdly put together in that way.
Yeah.
All right. Well, what about how the movie looked? We've seen a lot of versions of this. I thought they were spot on in including some of the things I needed to see from the Disney animated version. What did you feel about the way this movie looked?
Okay, as the movie like approaches the climax, I wondered if the screenwriters and director jumped on board so that they could do like a Fast and Furiousification of the pirate ship, because that's what it felt like to me. I thought it was super fun. I enjoyed the action scenes. I thought the costumes were great. I mean, obviously, like a pirate ship rising out of the water is like computer generated, but I was able to suspend my disbelief. It was a super fun chase scene.
It was really nice to see like a rollicking pirate story that wasn't just totally taken over and suffocated by the presence of Johnny Depp.
Totally.
Yeah, I thought it was really, I mean, the costume design. Initially, I was peeved that they didn't have Hook wearing like an extravagant curly wig, but then they did that wonderful scene where he fell in the water and all the dye came out of his hair and it was running down his face, and that was just enough to make me get on board. How about the crocodile? The crocodile was so incidental. You really only saw it, what, once?
But it was a very impressively large crocodile.
It was a huge crocodile, yes.
What it made up for in size what it lacked in screen time appearance.
It wasn't a terribly realistic crocodile, but it was Neverland, so I don't know that it was meant to be.
And it's more of a motif in some of the other films, like a recurring, and it's got like the clock in its stomach, so it's like you really feel like that passage of time and like the urgency, and there that was missing from this one, but I didn't really miss it until we started talking about it right now.
Well, yeah, a lot of the funny quirks about Captain Hook were missing because they were so anxious to delve into his backstory.
Mm-hmm.
There was less of that, oh, he's afraid of this crocodile because the crocodile swallowed his hand and got a taste for him. Did they even mention that?
No, I don't think so. I thought it was like Peter cut off his hand.
Oh, sorry, and fed it to the crocodile. Do you have any thoughts about the writing?
I liked it. I thought it was fun dialogue. It was appropriate, kept the plot moving along.
I liked that they had Wendy repeating some of the pep talk that her mother gave her about growing up at the beginning of the movie. At the end of the movie, when she was talking to Peter, I thought that was a really nice bookend. Again, as I said, I was brought up on the Mary Martin musical version of Peter Pan. So when we got all the way to the end and they had never had the exchange, "Boy, why are you crying?" I was feeling really badly about that, but then they inserted it right at the end. And I felt
Yeah.
so happy.
Nice.
I have a note here to talk about the music, and I wonder if you found the music to be as odd as I did.
It was like inspired by TikTok sea shanties.
Yes.
It was funny.
It was a real rewind to like summer 2020 when we were all singing sea shanties. So it was like just the pirates were musical.
Yeah, it wasn't really. It didn't bother me, but it didn't really add.
It bothered me. It seemed weirdly shoehorned in there because the pirates otherwise were not overly whimsical.
Mm-hmm.
And they left out a lot of the music from the 1953 animated version, except there was a little instrumental bit of, is it called You Can Fly? Yes. As they were flying out of their home over the London skyline.
Oh, nice. I didn't catch that.
Talk to me about the length. Under 2 hours, but over the hour and 30-minute sweet spot. How did it feel for you?
It was fine, and I watched it with my 10-year-olds, and it was a really good length for them. There was enough going on. I didn't want it to be shorter necessarily.
Hot take. It felt short to me. Too short.
Oh my gosh. Are you serious?
Not necessarily that I wanted there to be more, but that I didn't feel like there was enough time to flesh out any of the elements of the plot they were trying to bring in.
I wonder what got cut. You know, it could have been like a 2-hour, 30-minute director's cut. I don't know.
Which would have been too long. So I'm happy it wasn't super long because, again, it is a family movie that you're going to want to watch with your kids. But I just felt like the runtime meant that like no one's story was fully told.
Yeah. What adult movie or show were you able to compare this to?
Do you remember when we all got together for my baby shower before Jay was born?
Yes.
And we thought it would be fun to sit down and watch Knocked Up. Because we all had like fond memories about how funny it was when it came out in the theaters. And then we watched it and it was awful.
Yes.
Yeah, so I couldn't help thinking about that, just thinking about the whole boys don't ever want to grow up and have to be dragged kicking and screaming into adulthood by the more level-headed women around them.
Right.
How about you?
Okay, I've got a couple. I mean, Crossroads.
Oh.
Not a girl, not yet a woman. Failure to launch. And because I've been seeing a lot of promotion for White House Plumbers, which does look fun on HBO. It's like Watergate with Woody Harrelson. I am a little annoyed that all these Hollywood resources get poured into retelling another white guy story. And I feel like really, we need another Peter Pan? We don't actually need
Yeah.
another Peter Pan.
Nope, sure don't.
Were you able to cast the gritty HBO reboot?
So I would like to cast this with some eternally young Hollywood stars that look
Okay.
like they'd never age. So obviously Peter Pan would be played by Paul Rudd.
Oh, yeah.
And then I thought Keira Knightley would make a good Wendy because she also has a very youthful face. And then I was like, well, for the hook, we need this actor that was supposed to be eternally young and something went wrong and he has actually aged. So I thought we should cast Orlando Bloom.
Oh, that's an interesting one.
Everyone met him playing this ageless elf in Lord of the Rings, and that was not his fault. But I think we as a culture just kind of collectively decided that he should look like that forever.
And he doesn't.
But now he's an adult grown man that looks like an adult grown man, and I don't think people are entirely happy about it. And then I looked it up, and he's actually 8 years younger than Paul Rudd. So I think this would be a really good cast. How about you?
I like that. Okay. I want like a Wind Done Gone or a Wide Sargasso Sea retelling of Peter Pan from Tiger Lily's perspective. I didn't really cast it, but I would pay Taika Waititi like millions and millions of dollars to write the screenplay, cast it, film it, do whatever he wants, like unlimited budget really, in sort of that Reservation Dogs mold, because we don't need another one centered on Peter Pan. But I would watch another film centered on Tiger Lily.
Yeah, and I feel like Taika Waititi could really lean far into the Peter Pan is actually insufferable, which, to be fair, this movie did. I didn't feel like Peter Pan was as aspirational as he has been in past versions of Peter Pan.
Yeah.
But if you could just really steer into the absurdity that anyone is looking up to this hateful person.
Was it better when we were kids?
So many Peter Pans have come and gone. As remakes of Peter's Pan go, I actually thought this one was pretty solid. Like I would take this over the original. I know we'll get to our specific kids' reactions, but like I too had never shown my kids the original animated version. This was their first real exposure to the Peter Pan story, and I think it was fine.
Yeah, I can't. It's been so long since I watched Hook. I can't really. I'm not sure if that was problematic or not, and I am not sure. I don't know. I'm gonna have to end this one. I don't know. I don't know if it was better.
Hook is so iconic, but it's so of its time. I've watched it probably a few times since getting married because it was one of those like formative childhood movies for my husband. So we've watched it a time or two together. It's just so 90s and it's so Robin Williams and it's just steeped in these things that were so important in the culture that it's hard to divorce it from that. So I almost feel like this one is better just from a timelessness standpoint.
Would you ever watch it alone voluntarily?
I would never watch the story of Peter Pan in any form alone voluntarily because it frustrates me.
Yeah, same. 10 seconds on whether this is good for our kids.
This was really my kids' first full-blown pirate exposure, and they loved it. It was fun. I mean, you have to kind of embrace the fact that like stories about pirates are going to be violent, but there is an element of play to it. I don't know. They both had quite a bit of fun with this one.
Nice. And it's not scary.
No, I mean, there are scary-ish elements, but like they're disposed of pretty quickly. And there's a level of play even to those. Like there's this potentially scary moment where Michael and John are chained to a rock and the tide is going to come in and drown them. Scary. It's a scary setting and a scary idea. But then they also chain Michael's teddy bear to the rock. So you know that there's only a certain level of seriousness to it, which I really think helps temper that for the kids.
Ratings?
I hate to give a Peter Pan adaptation a high rating. You go first.
3.5.
All right. I feel good about that.
Okay.
Well, thanks for listening to this episode of It's My Screen Time Too. If you enjoyed our show today, please share it with someone you think might enjoy it too. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at MyScreenTime2, or send an email to myscreentime2@gmail.com. We'd love to hear your show or movie suggestions, article recommendations, or general comments about the show. Our website is myscreentime2.com. Our theme music was composed and performed by Deborah and her adorable children, and our podcast is produced by me, Katie. Tune in next time for more real talk about the movies and TV we watch with our kids because we have to, and sometimes because we like to. Bye!
Bye.